Hello, it's Laverne, and I am back to talk to you more about how I am so happily single. Last week we talked about I basically did an introduction of myself and a little bit about my personality and how I came to know that I have the gift of singleness and how I've lived my life up until now at age 63, but and have never been married or had children, but just how my journey, if you will, as a single woman, and how much pleasure and joy I've had in the process. Tonight, I want to talk about my personality traits that I believe contributed heavily and still contribute to the fact that I would rather live life as a single woman. Number one, I am introverted. Now, mind you, introverts get married all the time. But for me, as an introvert, even as a young girl, I would always prefer doing things alone. I'm the oldest of four, and I have three younger siblings. One is deceased, so I now have two. But whenever we would go outside to play and do things after school or in the summer, if I had an option, I would rather stay at home. I remember playing with my paper dolls or playing jacks, doing puzzles, coloring books, anything that I could do alone was number one on my to do list. So, realizing that I have an introverted personality, I think, in fact, I know, contributed heavily to my remaining single once I became older in my 20s and started dating and having relationships. I always knew that as an introvert, I would have to give up a lot. I would have to endure a lot. I would have to come out of my comfort zone a lot. And that's not a bad thing. None of those are bad things. But for me, they were not going to make me happy because having my alone time is like air to me. Constantly being bombarded with friends and family, or if I had gotten married, my husband's friends and family, as well as my friends and family. Maybe having to do a lot of social events and going here and going there and doing things all the time and expectations of attending events. That would really be draining for me and my introverted personality. And I knew that, and I knew that early on. And so I can honestly say that it would have been very difficult for me to get married, to have gotten married, and to have had children. Now let's talk about children. I know myself so well, and I'm sure that I knew myself, in my 20s reasonably well, well enough to know that while I would have loved my children dearly, I probably would have been the type of mother as they got older and as I knew, and obviously we can't control another human being. Once everyone is old enough to make their own decisions and live their own lives, then that's the job of a good parent. And I fully understood the job of a good parent was to love and nurture and guide your children to be healthy and happy adults capable of making their own decisions and flourishing on their own. But I could see myself, knowing my personality, at times wanting to be controlling, maybe controlling who my children were friends with, having a lot of input maybe into where I thought would be the right career path for them. And a lot of parents are controlling, and we can't help it. It's a personality trait, it's who we are, it's a part of our makeup. And I knew that I would probably be that kind of parent and that my children would resent me big time for trying to control their lives. So Knowing that about myself, I decided in my 20s, along with deciding that I didn't want to get married, I also made the decision that I didn't want to have children. It is such a major responsibility, and I know that. And I've heard so many women say it is the hardest job you'll ever love, and I believe that too. But more importantly, I know myself well enough, and I knew myself well enough to know that that was not really going to be a good decision for me. And not to mention the constant worrying about your children. You know, I can remember my mother when she was alive, and I lived in another state. I moved away and for a job that I had. And I would always tell her, you don't have to worry about me, I'm fine. And she would say, it doesn't matter how old you are or how fine you are, how well you're doing. As your mother, I'm still going to worry about you. That's what mothers do. And as a young woman, I knew that as well. I knew that it would come with a lot of worry, a lot of responsibility, a lot of love, but I just couldn't, for me, the cons of being a mother would outweigh the pros of being a mother. I also knew that being a mother doesn't come with any guarantees, you know. And I'm not one to take gambles. If I can't pretty much be sure of what I'm going to get or what's going to happen, I tend to shy away from those kinds of things. So definitely my introverted personality contributed in a major way to my not wanting to get married or having children. Now, many may feel that that's selfish, but even as a young woman, self-care, taking care of myself and making sure that I was happy, took precedence for me. And it still does at this point in my life. Another factor that I'm sure played heavily in my decision to remain single is I am a pessimist by society standards. I like to call it a realist. I'm a realist. I'm not an optimist. I'm a realist. Murphy's Law is very real to me. What can go wrong will go wrong. I am the type of person who maybe hopes for the best, but prepares for the worst. I always have to have a plan B. I always think about what could go wrong. The glass is always half empty to me. Again, it's my personality. So knowing that about myself, I knew it wouldn't be good for me to get married or have children. I'm not a happy-go-lucky kind of person. I don't always, expect things to go well. Because when I don't expect them to go well, and they do go well, oh my goodness, I am exuberant. It's exhilarating. It's like, wow, this was absolutely wonderful that things worked out so well, even better than I expected. And when I say better than I expected, that's what I mean, because I always expect for things not to go well. I'm always prepared for things not to go well. So by society's standards, I am a pessimist, but I like to call myself a realist. I am definitely a realist. And the third reason that my personality played a major role in my deciding to remain single is probably my astrological sign. I don't know how many of you believe in astrology, but as a young woman, I started following it. I'm not a fanatic about it, and I haven't religiously followed it throughout every decision I've ever made in my life. But I learned that being a Libra, which is represented by the scales, that is so apropos to me and my personality and making decisions. We weigh everything. Libras are always, we have that mental or physical list of pros and cons about every major and sometimes every minor decision that we make in our lives. When I looked at the list of pros and cons for marriage, I'll be honest with you, the cons outweighed the pros. The pros, off the top of my head, were things like companionship, were things like financial security. That's probably about it. Whereas the cons, having to cook and clean and, support, even though I was always going to have my own career and do my own thing, I always felt that a wife and mother shouldered the brunt of the responsibility when it came to marriage and children. So on my list of cons were, probably doing most of the cooking, most of the cleaning, supporting my husband, and I'll be honest with you, sleeping together. And I realize a lot that's traditionally what married people do. But again, I need my own space. I love my own company. I need peace and quiet and serenity. So I could probably see myself, being one of those wives who for a period of time would want to, sleep separately from her husband. But again, that was on the list of cons. So I knew that marriage was not going to and let's not forget having to consult your husband about major decisions, depending on how your household would be run. I'm the type of person that wants to make my own decisions when it comes to money and things like that, whether we would have a separate or combined bank account, and maybe we would have both. I don't know. But I'm just telling you the things that I put on my list of cons. And because the cons outweighed the pros, when I considered marriage, I knew that it was not for me. So as a Libra, I did that. And the same thing with becoming a mother, which I already went through with you, the worrying, the financial responsibility, trying to, controlling them which is a bad thing to say, but wanting to control children, even when they're young, it's a lot easier to do when they're younger. But when they get older, you can't control, ultimately a teenager or a young adult who's ready to go and experience things on their own. So those were the kinds of things that I listed, in terms of pros and cons that helped me decide that marriage and having children were probably not the best things for me to do. So I said all that to say that my astrological sign, which is Libra, contributed heavily as well to my not wanting to get married. So those are the top three reasons, my being an introvert, my astrological sign, and there was one other, and it slipped my mind, being an introvert, astrological sign. Anyway, I can't remember the third one. I'll have to go back and watch this video again. And being a realist, which society likes to call a pessimist. So you have an introverted realist who is a Libra. When you stack all of those three things together, that gives you some idea as to why I wanted and why I chose to remain a single woman throughout my life. And at age 63, I can honestly say I don't have any regrets. I may go back and I may wonder, wow, I wonder if I'd had children, they'd be on their own and I'd be a grandmother by now, and wouldn't that be nice? Yeah, it would be nice. But I'm real enough to know that in order to get from point A to point B, the struggle, the pain, the disappointment, the stress, the worry, the financial responsibility, all of that for me would not have been worth it. So I stand by, that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Thank you so much for joining me for another issue of happily single, feel free to comment on the video and subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching.